Call the Committee of the Whole meeting of Council for Monday, June the 24th to order, and ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Councillors Cunningham and Niche. Any additions or deletions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. For the sake of community members that may not be aware, the Committee of the Whole operates just a little bit differently than the regular council meeting. One of the most notable pieces is it's not a decision-making meeting. We can make recommendations that can then be forwarded to the council, regular council meeting, but nothing decided in this meeting is binding. If you happen to be presenting, encourage you to come forward to the microphone and we'll help you make sure that it's turned on. Identify yourself, not just for the sake of the people that are here in the room, but also because the meetings are recorded and televised, and we want to make sure that people know who it is that's presenting. And in addition to that, encourage you as much as possible to keep your presentation under 5 minutes, if that's possible. There is a lot of business to be done yet this evening. So with that, we have 3 presentations for the community this evening. We've got beginning with the Manager of Communications, Engagement, and Social Development around the 2023 annual report. Manager Stewart, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Veronica Stewart, and I am our Manager of Communications. I'm going to do my best to be brief today in presenting everything that happened in 2023 and everything that we're going to do in 2024. Wish me luck. I'd like to begin just by acknowledging that we're on Tsimshian territory. A lot of the work that we've been doing over the past few years is in recognition and partnership with Tsimshian nations from our community, and we've also got some reporting this year that also relates to that work that we've been doing, and so we just want to make sure that we're acknowledging them and their territory, but also this isn't the only part that we're doing to work towards better relationships there. Okay, so what is the point of an annual report? It's essentially like our Christmas letter to you 6 months late. It highlights key accomplishments from 2023, as well as our goals for 2024. It also includes financial statements and a number of different items that we have to report on legally. And it's something that all municipalities do as part of their obligations under the community charter. So there's always opportunity for the public to also comment on what is presented. So that will be available to the public at the at the end of this presentation. So essentially, when we're setting our goals for our strategic plan, which then informs what we report back out on, we start with the community vision. The community vision is something that's set out in our official community plan. It helps to guide council and staff basically towards a community that we all would like to live in. Some of the main goals that are then informed by that vision are the fiscal health of the community, appropriate laws and services, replacing and renewing infrastructure, supporting new and renewed housing, good governance and community renewal, as well as fostering local and economic, social, cultural, and environmental well-being. And these are all goals that are generally identified in the strategic plan. And then all the actions that we have in the strategic plan that we're reporting out on today kind of are coming out of those specific goals that we have. So you'll see in the next section the different goals and then some of the actions that we've done in 2023 or that are ongoing into 2024. So the first area that we're looking at is our financial health, because you can't have a good community without having money to pay for it. So some of the main items that you'll see that we have been working on is there's currently a dispute advisory panel happening over the payment in lieu of taxes with the Port of Prince Rupert. We've been working on our resource benefit agreement negotiations in 2023, and then we had some success with that in 2024 with a 5-year agreement that was signed. We're working on developments for Watson Island and Lot 444, resolving the port property tax caps, working on subsidizing the airport ferry service, and also pursuing a landfill authorization for Watson Island so that we can accept soils and generate revenues so that we can close that in the future. So there's some of the main things. I'm not going to read off every single slide because that might take too long, and then I'll be over my 5 minutes. All right. So another thing that we work on is making sure that we have appropriate laws and services so that our services and regulations that we have in place are modern and effective at doing what we want them to. So having a transportation plan that guides different improvements to our transportation network, making sure that we have a bylaw enforcement policy in place that helps us basically activate the bylaws that we have and make sure that the community is looking nice and all the other things that bylaws are intended to do. Reviewing our different incentive programs and updating our different bylaws. So those are some of the key items that we had for 2023, and some of them are continuing again into 2024. Infrastructure is a major priority for Prince Rupert, and anybody that has seen the many traffic detours and holes dug up in the ground will know that. We are working really hard at replacing many of our water mains and soon-to-be sewer mains as well. We really encourage people to look at our website for more information on our big project, is what we're calling it, for more information essentially on the different areas that are going to be covered in our plan to replace key infrastructure assets. We also are working on relocating public works, replacing the RCMP building, the fire hall, eventually looking at renewal for that, and then sanitary and sewer treatment. We have a kind of a pilot project that's going to be going into Moresby at the end of this summer. Another key priority is also just renewing the community in general. So that looks like our different parks. So we've done planning around that, new waterfront development that's happening. People may have seen the new parking, for instance, on Bill Murray Way that's connected to that. Planning for when we replace the pipes under 2nd Avenue in the downtown core, how can we make the streetscape look nicer and be more inviting for people? And then a number of other kind of planning and community renewal initiatives. More information on all of those key projects is available in the actual report itself. So if anyone's interested in that, I encourage you to have a look. One of the other things we wanted to do in this particular iteration of the annual report is identify how we're actually bringing some of our plans into action. So we've actually adopted a couple of new plans in the last year, and there's 2 more coming at least in the next year. So our parks plan has been adopted, and so is our transportation plan. So we wanted to highlight in the plan itself how we're actually actioning those items. So one of the things is that we're looking at 3 new transit shelters at areas that were identified as priorities in the transportation plan. We're actioning them through grants. Working on renewing Mariners Park, which was identified as a flagship park in the parks plan. The parking and rail crossing access along Bill Murray Drive was something that was highlighted in the transportation plan, and also working on fundraising for Odd Isaac Park with community partners. So those are all priorities that kind of link into those plans and how we action them, so that they don't just sit dusty on a shelf. So good governance is obviously going to be a key priority for any local government, and there's a number of ways that we can accomplish that. One of which is adopting a strategic plan that then helps us to guide this reporting process that you're all enjoying, hopefully, right now. Other things are working on different agreements with other local governments. So some things that we've updated are our fire service agreement with Port Ed, as well as a cooperation agreement. We've adopted a council code of conduct recently, and developing prosperity agreements with First Nations. So these are some aspects of the good governance, the work that we do, and there's more again in the plan. Another key priority for council has been encouraging new and renewed housing. Housing isn't something that traditionally falls under the purview of municipalities, but we do try to do what we can in terms of policy and incentivizing housing in order to make sure that there is housing for folks in the community. So one of the things we've done is we're implementing our interim housing strategy. We've established an appropriate site to receive peat, which is something that a lot of developers have to deal with. They got to dig. I'm looking at Councillor Niche in order to actually build up out of the ground. We've put in a couple of applications to the Federal Rapid Housing Initiative to meet severe housing need, and as well to the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. Unfortunately, our applications were unsuccessful because it is quite a competitive process. However, we have those in hand now to keep going for the funding every time that it's available, and there have been new openings announced. So we anticipate continuing to work on that. And then we're also going to be starting an affordable housing strategy in 2024. One of the things that people might have been seeing if they're following our council meetings closely is a lot of bylaw changes around housing. So the province has put down a number of different regulations around short-term rentals, as well as support for small-scale multi-unit housing. And so we've had to update our regulations to kind of follow suit. So different ways that we've had to do this or will be doing this is updating our housing needs assessment, our official community plan, and aligning our regulation of short-term rentals, and also some regulations around density. So some of these have already happened and some are in process for 2024 and 2025. And so the final goal to report on is fostering economic, social, cultural, and environmental well-being. What we've done towards that is we've established an Indigenous Relations Committee, of which I'm helping support on the staff side, which is exciting. We've got an accessibility committee going, as well as a plan that's going to be forthcoming in the fall. You may have seen some community surveys around that. We've updated our website to an accessible standard as part of that accessibility work. We've done some rezonings to enable childcare to go in more areas of the community. And we're actually going to hear tonight about the social development assessment that was just recently completed. So some of these actions have already been completed, and then others are still working. We're still working towards in 2024. Another thing that is worth noting is that recreation has also been expanding available programming. So they are including pickleball and also some enhanced mobility programming with their partners in 2024. So we highlighted that in the report because it's some new things. And then there's just some statistics on different uses of the recreation facility. We also use the report as an opportunity to share just general department facts and statistics so that you kind of understand where the tax dollars are going. So for instance, the fire department took in 13,238 calls to 911 and responded to 911 emergency incidents. I had to double check that that was not a typo on my behalf, and it was not. And there was $527,000 recorded in property damage, as well as 16 million in property saved, which I think is a good thing to highlight. There's also a number of other statistics there. I won't read them all off because, again, I don't want to go over my time limit. It's a long agenda. Something worth noting is that in 2023, we were awarded the Lieutenant Governor's Award at the ACECBC Awards for the Woodworth Dam. So that's an engineering award that we were awarded in partnership with the contractors who worked with us, which is worth noting. And there is more information, as I mentioned, in the report. So there's detailed updates on some of the key projects that we have going. So if you saw something on the screen and you said, Veronica just glazed over that, there wasn't enough there. There is a lot more in the report. There's a number of photo highlights, and then our full adopted financial statements are also available, and contact information for staff.
Great.
And paper copies are also available here if anybody would like them. The next section is to allow opportunity for comment from the public.
Yep. Stay there for just a moment, though. Council, any comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Forster.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Recognizing there's not a lot of time, there was a comment about what, as a city, we've done about the port tax cap.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if there's an update on that or a bit more information we could share with the public.
Dr. Buchan, hiding behind the presentation somewhere. We're just going to pull that down and bring you back up. Up in the upper right, I think. Well, maybe I'm wrong. Oh, there we are. All right. Dr. Buchan, can you comment on the current status of the port tax cap dialogue?
Your Worship, there hasn't been a lot of dialogue as of late with the province, though we are pushing now to have those discussions restarted. And I'll note that you sent a letter off a couple months ago, and we are now making requests to meet with the Minister of Finance to see where we're at with their consideration of the matter. This is not resolving the port tax cap in a way that makes the city whole is not a nice to have, it's a must to have for in order for us to deal with our infrastructure. So this is something that we will simply, in my view, have to keep on pushing on until we're successful, because we can't get to the level of funding that we need for infrastructure renewal until we resolve that. It is a significant cost to the community, and it's one that we remain focused on resolving.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Cunningham.
Where are we with the PILT dispute?
Dr. Buchan.
Your worship, that is also an ongoing process. The latest place that we've been is under a process to compel the PRPA to provide data to allow us to complete our appraisals. We have to complete an appraisal process as a part of our challenge of the PILT payments, and critical to that are, of course, our data that the PRPA has that they have been unwilling to release to us for this purpose. So we are under an appeal on that as well. I will ask Director Bombin if she has anything to add to that.
Director Bombin.
No, Dr. Buchan summarized it quite well. Thank you.
So in other words, the port's hiding things from us.
We are not getting the information that we've requested under the Information Act, Privacy and Freedom of Information.
Councillor Randella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So thank you for your presentation. So where people can take like online, they can see, and if somebody need hard copy, where they can get.
Manager Stewart.
So there is a copy online. It's on the front page of our website. If you just land on the front page, you'll see that there's a copy there, and you can click through and you can read it on the page. Or there are hard copies at City Hall, at the library, and at the recreation complex at our customer service desks.
Great. Any other comments or questions from council? And members of the public, anybody want to come and comment on it? Come on forward. Just hang on. I've got one person coming forward. No, sorry, traffic jam. I'm managing the traffic. I will get back to you, I promise. Mr. Saka.
Hello, my name is Terry Saka. I'm a longtime resident of Prince Rupert since 1960. And after reading the report several times, there's a couple items that have jumped out at me. And one is just a little bit of history. I lived on Park Avenue since 1960 to 1986. You look at, say, 35 years, where the area where it's known as the Moresby Dam or Moresby Creek used to be under the control of the Department of National Defense. It was all fenced off. And as a young kid, we used to go down there, sneak underneath the fence, and catch rainbow trout and dollies, Dolly Varden in that creek. So there's also salmon. There was a ladder built there, and there was salmon coming up there once in a while. Now, the thing that has come to my attention is there's a proposal to put a sewer treatment plant in that area. And I truly believe it's unbeknown to the general public because it's not really been advertised aside on the city's website. Well, not everybody goes on the city's website. Originally, this project was going to be built down on the lower part of Almanica. It has been determined that that is not viable. So somebody has come up with the idea that it could be put into the Moresby Basin area. The things that I have of concern, whether anybody has looked at, is that area, that's the only green space area in Prince Rupert. At one time, years ago, there was picnic tables there, there was fire pits there, but it turned into a party zone, and people on Moresby Avenue lobbied the city, and all that stuff was taken out, and so that area has been left to disrepair. But there was a group a month ago or so Volunteers went in there and cleaned up the trails. It's a very nice walking area. Now, and that should be maintained. Now, the things that stand out is a treatment plant viable in the middle of a residential area? That area there borders by a campground, Moresby Avenue Homes, the Kitkatla residence, low income home housing, the transition house, homes on Kootenai Avenue and on Park Avenue. All those places, all those things are going to be impacted. Is that area zoned for what's been described in here?
So let me, we've got Director Pucci here, and he can give you some of the detail points on that, but just a couple quick points to help. We're talking about a wetland. It'll be a very natural looking. We're not talking about a concrete sewage treatment plant, you know, with the aerator or whatever. This is a wetland. It'll look incredibly natural. Secondly, it is not in a place where it's going to interfere with the trails and the other things. And this has been, and I appreciate that no matter how much we talk about it, the public still is often unaware. But this has been the subject of a number of very public presentations, very public meetings here in this place. The engineering firm that's designing it did a long presentation here, right where you're sitting. But Director Pucci, do you have any? Dr. Buchan, with your permission, I'll go to Director Pucci.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Mayor is correct. It is a wetland treatment system, a passive wetland treatment system. It's also a pilot system, so it's not very large. The footprint of it will be basically where Tank 1 and Tank 2 were, beside the former Anchor Inn on the BC Ferry side of that path, and it will not conflict with the walking trail that's there. So basically we'll fit in that rectangular area to pilot the passive wetland treatment. Basically it will look like a meadow of grass with a fence around it.
And the outflow, Director Pucci, from that treatment is contained and will go back into the outfall. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. It is a fully sealed unit. The flow goes through the system, and then will be put back into the outfall, will not be discharged into the creek.
Thank you. Dr. Buchan. Oh, sorry. Dr. Buchan.
Yeah, Your Worship, just to augment what Director Pucci has said. So and to reiterate what you said, this is not a plant in the traditional sense. It is a wetland. It will look like grass. That's what people will see. So, you know, in terms of fit and aesthetics, it'll fit what you see there now. Of significance, I think, in addition to the environmental benefits of this approach, is that this approach will save approximately $100 million for the city's taxpayers using this approach versus a traditional physical concrete treatment plant.
Yeah, and first of all, I really appreciate you raising it. Okay, so but I'll emphasize again that it's a pilot project. So if we were to discover that it's not working, it's not effective, whatever, it won't be repeated. If it does work, it will be repeated. So yeah.
So if I may finish my concerns here, haven't had some on-hand experience with leaching type of systems. There's one actually out on Watson Island right now where a trench was dug around the backside of the island. I'm not sure whether it's still operating or not, where the leaching from the hog pile and surrounding area went into this trench, and there was pumps and things that I was involved in maintaining once in a while, where it reached to a certain level. Sooner or later, you're going to have containment basin. And that has several problems. One is that it overflows. Two, eventually you're going to have to drain it and take the sludge, the sediment that's in there, you have to remove that. You have to put it somewhere. If there's problems, and I know from personal experience again, when there was problems in that leaching system, if you drove out the highway to the viewpoint, if there was all kinds of frothing happening on, it means that that containment system was not working properly, and there was an overflow going into the Zanardi Rapids.
Right.
So I'm quite, and I'm also quite familiar with effluent treatment plants because I was involved in the commissioning of the Bean Mill Pulp Mill when Mr. Petty built the state-of-the-art treatment plant, containment plant. Once a year, the 3 tanks that were there, one would be drained and the sludge from the bottom would be taken out. So there's nothing bulletproof. As far as it being a nice grassy area, I'm also familiar with this similar type of treatment plant in Maui, and it stinks because the stuff that goes in there gets collected. It doesn't go anywhere, so it puts out a smell. So I'm sure the people up on Bernardsdale Street are going to have some concerns with that. The other places where I've researched on this is where these type of plants are the stuff that is collected and the water that after it settles, it's been used for fertilizer and irrigation. We don't have anything to fertilize here, and we get enough water for.
Yeah. So again, you're talking about very, very different systems. This system is completely different from the things you're describing, and I encourage you to have a look at. There's material available, but I also encourage you to move along because presenters get 5 minutes, and you're over your 5 minutes. So.
And I just want to bring to your attention that the effluent system that was designed in Vancouver started at $700,000, and it's probably 40% complete, and they're at $3.6 billion.
Again,
so again,
nothing's similar. Not one piece is similar.
When pilot projects come online, it goes cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. A lot of these types of systems are used in Europe, from my understanding, for the information that I've managed to bounce around on my computer and find. The second item that I have is the status of the McCarthy property.
Yes.
For 3.5 years, we've been paying, or the city has been paying, in excess of $300,000 a year, $25,000 a month for an empty building. My understanding is that that's almost $1 million of taxpayers' money that has been used, and the only thing that I see that's going on there is a fence has been put on, so people like me can't go and look in a window to see what's going on inside. Now, I was also having told that there's a report out that that place is not viable. It's not big enough to accommodate moving city works to McCarthy. So that's one concern I have. Taxpayers' money has been squandered for 3.5 years. And the other concern I have is, my understanding is that the McCarthy business has been sold. So with the city being involved in a contract, a lease agreement, what's the status of that lease agreement now that this property has been sold to, I believe, some people from Alberta?
Yeah, any agreement would survive the sale, and we will have a project report coming up. We'll have a project report coming up in the regular meeting. Actually, a project update.
So
and that will include McCarthy.
And I see we're going to have some bus stations.
Correct.
3. I think we could probably use a dozen.
Oh yeah, definitely.
At least.
Do you want to sponsor one?
What's that?
If you want to sponsor one, we could go to 4.
We could have, if I had known ahead of time that that's what the city was.
Well, we're always open.
But we could have.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Saka. I do see, Councillor, no, we'll pass. Thank you very much. Any other member of the public? Oh, yes, there was one other member of the public. Come on forward. You have to come forward because it's the only way that people at home can hear what you're saying. And so there's a button on that microphone. Yeah, and just identify yourself and then ask your question.
I'm Kristen Berry. I just wanted to know what PILT stood for, but I Googled it. So.
Oh, but okay. No, listen. It's one of the reasons I appreciate Mr. Saka's question, because if somebody's thinking it here, somebody else out there is thinking it, they're not Googling it. So PILT stands for Payment in Lieu of Taxes. And so the federal government, the provincial government, where they own property in the city, they are not required to pay taxes, but there is a process by which they pay what's called payment in lieu of taxes. And I'm very thankful you came forward, because I really don't like it when people communicate in acronyms that nobody else understands. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next presentation, which is Urban Matters, Prince Rupert Social Development Assessment. And I believe both Ms. Burrell and Mr. Volpe are online.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm Ann Burrell. I work with Urban Matters. We've been engaged with the city to do a social needs assessment. Will's going to share his screen here shortly with our slides. I'm going to start us off just taking you through just a high-level sort of quick look at the process that we use to do the social development assessment, and then I'll turn it over to Will to talk about what we learned and some of the recommendations that we're making. So let's go right forward, Will, into the overview of the project. Great, thank you. So what is a social needs assessment? It's really a process used to identify what are the strengths, the opportunities, and the gaps in the social sector in the community. And it's done by gathering information through both background research, some data analysis, and input from social service providers, from people with lived experience in the community, and from other organizations, including Indigenous organizations, to really try and get as comprehensive of an understanding of the social needs of the community as possible. So this project has taken place over the last sort of 6 to 8 months. And I'll just take you through what we mean, how we did it, and then turn it over to Will. So what do we mean by social services? I'm not going to read through the whole bulleted list, but it's things like food security, mental health, substance use and addictions, homelessness prevention, family support, counseling, literacy supports, and victim services. So those are just sort of broadly the kinds of things that fall in that bucket of social services. And so undertaking the social development assessment, which we've done starting in late 2023 with some background research, some planning around engaging with the community. And then in February and March, we undertook a number of engagement activities in the community, some virtual and some in person. And then we gathered all of the input that we got from those engagement sessions, as well as the background research and the data analysis, and an inventory of social programs in the community. And we pulled all of that together. We shared the results of that back to a advisory group that we had put together in partnership with city staff to guide the project. We walked them through a bit of a sense-making process to make sure that we had a really good understanding of what the sort of strengths and assets, as well as gaps and needs in the community were, and then put together a final report and an inventory of services in the community. And we're here presenting that to you tonight. So we had great input from the community broadly. We heard from a number of different organizations across the community. This is a list of everyone that we talked to. Again, some of those were one-on-one conversations, some were virtual meetings, and also some in-person meetings. And we also had some interviews and focus groups with folks with lived experience in the community. So this is the important part. We want to tell you a little bit about what we found and some of the recommendations that we're making. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Will Volpe.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, so the first thing I'm going to highlight is Anne's and I engagement with people with lived experience. So these are people with experience of accessing social services within Prince Rupert. So we were at Cranes Crossing and Salvation Army talking to people about their experiences and had them kind of highlight their challenges and then opportunities that they're looking for to kind of support them. And so I'm not going to read off all of this, but a few things to highlight. Access to treatment is very tough. When they do access treatment, something like housing, maybe the housing doesn't always align with their needs, but it's the only spot that's available, so they'll take it. So say if it's housing and they're looking for dry housing, but the housing isn't dry, then they're kind of this mismatch, but that's the only spot available, so they'll take it. Difficulty getting help, and then things to do during the day, there's not much for them to do. But then when we were talking about opportunities, what could you do to support yourself? They were saying a short-term job. They can't saying they might not be able to hold down a very long-term job, but if there's something they can show up when they're feeling good that day, that would be really good for them to build their confidence. Low barrier training as well, something where they can do something creative, wraparound and peer support, so be supported by people who have been through similar experiences, and then connecting to their culture. We also wanted to highlight the community strengths as well. So we also talked to service providers who kind of highlighted what's going on in the community. And I just wanted to highlight that while these are also community strengths, they also show up in the summary of challenges, but just a few: advocacy and justice supports, mental health and addiction, senior support, transfer the size of the community. While these services exist, there's obviously a need for more capacity and funding in all these places to better improve services. But we also want to highlight a lot of things that are upcoming in the city that are looking to address needs: new childcare spaces, cities working on new housing initiatives, new reconciliation initiatives, and new safety initiatives. So there's a lot happening. So there's a lot to be proud of and excited about. But when we talked to service providers about the challenges, similar themes came up where it was a community strength, but more funding or more capacity needed in certain areas. For example, families, children, and youth. Youth homelessness, there isn't really a space for youth to go just due to the age limits of certain facilities. There's no real respite care, limited spaces for partners fleeing violence, or limited mental health services. There's often a long wait list. Food programming. Food programming service providers have seen a large increase since COVID. And then there's gaps in food programming due to limited services. There's a shortage of affordable units. A lot of people experiencing homeless right now were kicked out of more affordable units during COVID when prices went up. People looking for Indigenous-focused social service supports, and then a need for more mental health and addiction supports. And then other general supports as well, just like transportation to other communities to access services that aren't here. There's a lack of a funeral home in the community, and a lack of referral options. So if there's a service provider and they identify a need for a person, they might not be able to provide that care to that person because they can't find the appropriate referral just because of the wait list and the lack of capacity. And then I just wanted to highlight kind of these three main pillars. So these were talked about by kind of all the service providers as like these key things that are needed to address to help them provide services, and then they can help address the challenges that were just mentioned in the other slide, like housing. So housing for their clients, but also housing for their staff. Staffing is a major issue. Trying to maintain staffing and build that knowledge within the community is difficult. And then it's also tied to the funding. There's a lack of consistent and sustainable funding. So service providers are spending a lot of their time chasing short-term funding or trying to fit their existing programs into these provincial and federal funding models to make ends meet. And so then I'm quickly going to go into recommendations. These recommendations were developed from the feedback we had heard in partnership with staff and then reviewed by the advisory group. And the big thing we wanted to put forward with these recommendations is that these issues are large and they're affecting many communities across Canada. And there is a piece that the city can do a lot, but it shouldn't and can't be doing everything. And so we really want to focus on what is in the city's power and what should the city influence and where can you do the most good. So defining that role will help in social services will help the city kind of move forward in any action. continue participating in reconciliation committees and accessibility committees, exploring opportunities to develop incentive programs to work with nonprofits to identify to fill certain gaps, and support the communication and collaboration of service organizations across the city. There's also places for the city to partner with others to improve action. So work on the housing needs, implementing the housing acceleration plan, exploring opportunities for workforce housing, leveraging city-owned land to develop housing, and supporting local nonprofits to develop their own housing to support their clients, to continue to advocate for social services that are identified in this plan, and develop a lens tool to support the inclusion of poverty reduction and accessibility considerations in the development of the city's policies. When we think about advocacy and partnerships, we can also look to partner with local organizations to facilitate funding, continue to support their own capacity building and hiring processes, and continue to support Indigenous organizations that provide social services to Indigenous peoples. And then the last piece, engaging Indigenous peoples, should be at the bedrock of all these plans, and continue to work with the Indigenous nations to provide services to people in Prince Rupert, and continue recognizing that building trust, engaging in reconciliation will have social benefits. So that is the end of our presentation.
So I can provide an answer, and then I don't know if staff want to respond as well. But so we did, in the process, we really worked quite collaboratively with your staff to reach out to Indigenous nations around the community to invite them into the process. We know that folks working in community are, at capacity. People are stretched really thin in terms of participating in these kinds of engagement processes. So they certainly were invited in. We were able to talk to some individuals in Indigenous organizations, but not in the nations. And I would say that, the work that the municipality is doing around the Indigenous Relations Committee and the reconciliation work that you're doing, I think can inform the work of this sort of social development assessment going forward, and continue to have those conversations.
Yeah, I can take this one. So we've heard, basically this was from service providers who were working with the international students. And so what they were hearing was that because of the lack of housing, maybe they show up and they're still looking for housing, they would maybe accept housing situations that maybe aren't ideal, And so maybe it's a little more affordable in a place that's maybe not suited for them, but in trickier situations, just because there aren't other options. So that's what we're hearing from service providers in our focus groups.
This again is all people involved inside the city and not outside the city. And Rupert being a gathering place for millennia, for Indigenous people, a lot of people come to Rupert and they're living in multi-generation situations and things like this, which add to a lot of other problems. And so how would you overcome some of these barriers?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. And I think it's a challenging question to answer, certainly. I would say that many communities are struggling with these issues generally. I think the social service sector is also struggling in most communities in similar ways to the sector struggles in Prince Rupert in terms of finding and retaining staff and having the capacity to meet the needs of the community. Volunteer, we know that post-COVID volunteerism has dropped considerably, recruiting people for boards of directors, things like that. And municipalities, to be honest, have limited ability to influence those kinds of really challenging systems issues. At the same time, I think what we've seen is that the city is working really hard to pull people together. I know the situation table that some of your staff chair and support has been an important addition to the community and has brought people together. I think there's a role for municipalities in terms of convening the sector around these really challenging and kind of stuck social issues in communities. And then as well, advocacy, to other levels of government around the resources that your community needs and around things like sustainable funding. I think what we heard from organizations, and Will talked about this, is that often funding is very short term. It might be 6 months or a year sort of funding at a time. And so organizations spend a tremendous amount of time trying to find funding to serve the needs of the folks that they're trying to deliver services to. And that time is much better served actually delivering services to community rather than writing funding applications. And so advocacy, I think, to other levels of government around sustainable long-term funding that really meets the needs of your community. I think those are all important things that the city can be doing.
One obstacle we seem to come across quite a bit in different organizations is the availability of government services, because government's going more and more to online, and a lot of the vulnerable people, one, don't have access to online, and two, are not savvy enough IT-wise to use it. And this is getting to be more and more difficult for the vulnerable population to access these government services, and that's one way we've identified a real stranglehold on a lot of services, because these people just can't get to the services.
Yeah, one of the, I think it is a real challenge, and it's a challenge in many rural communities, and I think in the larger communities as well. The technology access is really tricky, and so it really depends on local organizations essentially being navigators for vulnerable people to access provincial and regional services. And some communities have taken the approach of actually establishing a navigator position in their community. to be sort of the facilitator of access to services. And so that's perhaps something that could be a subject of a conversation in the community.
Great. Last question, Councillor Skelton Morvan.
I just wanted to thank you for your presentation and for the work you've done. I think there's a lot of key facets that we can take away from this. When we talk about sustainable funding, I mean, given your roles and working with multiple communities, what kind of models do you see that work, whether it's between municipalities or even industry partners in the region? What do you find that, I guess, is a proven model? Because I think there's a lot of notes that we can take from other places that have the similar aspects of scarcity and resources and different things like that. And I myself, in another life outside of this role, is I'm in the nonprofit front, and I definitely wholeheartedly agree that a lot of time is taken from service delivery and focusing on funding stream applications and things like that. And a lot of them are short term, with the longest term being 3 years, and then you're hooped essentially after that. I've seen a plenty of organizations go through this process, and also the change with government and different things like that, and higher tiers of funding. And then that funding then no longer is available, and then the programs just wrap up completely, and the organizations go under. But I guess short in this is just what kind of models do you see in your experience that have worked in this particular front?
Thanks very much for the question. And I wish I had a wonderful sort of, model that I could share with you. Again, I think most communities and most organizations in the social sector are struggling with exactly this. I would say that the provincial government has made some steps in trying to improve the landscape in terms of the funding that flows. So there was recently some funding that was announced where, there's provincial funding that's flowing through community foundations. It's operational funding that's 3 years, which is much better than the sort of one year funding that we've seen previously. So I think we're seeing some small steps. That information is available I think the portal is through the Vancouver Foundation. And so I'd encourage anybody who's participating in the meeting or watching the meeting in the social sector to look at the Vancouver Foundation funding that's just been announced, and that's a great way to access some more long-term funding. There aren't, like I say, I wish that there were sort of great models in other communities in BC, but I think we need to continue to advocate to government for some of those things.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for your presentation, and thanks for your work.
Thanks very much for your time.
All right. Moving on to the third presentation, Prince Rupert Cricket Club. Who's coming forward? Absolutely. Yep. Not loud enough to go into people's homes on television. So you want to push the button?
Thank you, Rosa. So my name is Cam Siemens. I'm here on behalf of the Prince Rupert Cricket Club. This is maybe fairly new to a lot of people, but after this presentation, you'll see exactly why this is a growing sport. You guys were also, I noticed in your guys' presentation, pickleball. Well, you'll understand after the presentation why cricket is such a big sport. So to my lovely left, I have Piyush. He's the captain of the Prince Rupert Cricket Club. And then we have Dilpreet here as well, and he's a part of the cricket club. Suresh over here, he is from our board, and so am I. How this works before we go into this is Prince Rupert Cricket Club is a part of the Northwest BC Cricket Association. And we are also members of Cricket BC. So we're a provincial body, and it goes nationally as well now, so Cricket Canada. So we have done all the work to actually be affiliated with all the proper channels. And so Prince Rupert is a part of that. So that's a big, big deal. So on with our lovely presentation. So as you can tell, Rosa was very instrumental. So thank you very much for this They were, as we all know, Prince Rupert, I grew up here. Rain is a part of, natural life. But to play cricket, we kind of need an alternative. And thus, we were able to have an affordable option to use the indoor arena. So thank you all for that. Next. Oh, this thing? Oh, there we go. Thank you. There we go. Sorry about that. So what exactly is cricket and how is it played? It's better off if YouTube tells you guys instead. So we'll just click on there, Suresh. Thank you.
While North America focused on the NBA championship and Stanley Cup finals, most sports fans in parts of the world were glued to this. Cricket, a game sometimes described as a cross between baseball and chess. Invented in England back in the 16th century, cricket spread around the world through British colonizers.
Magnificent 231 not out the gate, England a total of 426.
Today, it's the second most watched sport in the world after soccer, with 2.5 billion devout followers worldwide. But how do you actually play? Depending on the format, cricket can last hours, a day, or even up to 5 days. But the rules, or laws as they're known as, are always the same. It's played on an oval-shaped field, and in the middle of the field is a rectangle called the cricket pitch. At each end of the pitch are wickets made of 3 wooden stumps to support 2 bails. The game involves 2 teams with 11 players on each side. The aim of the game is to score more runs than the opposition. The umpires judge fair and unfair play. It begins with one team going out on the field, and the other comes in to bat. The fielding team has a bowler who uses different techniques to bowl the ball to the batsman. The batsman tries to hit the ball and score runs by hitting the ball and running between the wickets, making it to the other end before the fielders can hit the wickets with the ball. Each time he runs a full length of the pitch, it equals 1 run. Hitting the ball to the boundary along the ground is 4 runs. Hitting the ball over the boundary without touching the ground equals 6 runs, the highest scoring shot. In the meantime, the fielding team tries to get the batsman out as quickly as possible in a number of ways. Knocking the stumps off the wickets with a ball when bowling, catching a batsman's shot before it touches the ground, hitting the batsman's leg in front of the wicket, or hitting the wickets before the batsman can run to the other side of the pitch. Unlike baseball, a batsman in cricket can bat as long as they don't get out, but when they're out, they have to leave the field for good. Each set of 6 balls is considered an over. In one-day international, each inning has a maximum of 50 overs. Once all the batters are out, or if they run out of overs, it's the other team's turn to bat. The winner is the team with the highest number of runs once both sides have batted.
Yeah, you don't have to
Cricket
hold it
explained
down.
if you already know baseball.
All right. To get this started, I want you to imagine a game much like baseball, except that.
Oh, okay. So we have to go back to the presentation. Sorry. There we go. There we go. So why are we here? We love the sport, of course, but there is a little bit of history with Roosevelt Field. We have been online as well with the outdoor recreation plan, and we've sort of looked at it in depth. And we are here to be able to sort of help fill a bit of the gaps. So the ability to grow the sport, not only to the youth, and adults within this community, once a proper ground could be constructed. We have already a few community groups that we can, like funders that we can work with. We really don't have a ground. The reason why I say Roosevelt is a little bit nostalgic, as I was mentioning to Herb Pond. I'm originally from Prince Rupert. When I was here in the 80s, a lot of my father's friends, they used to play cricket there. So it's the ideal ground. However, we all know that there are a bit of the water drainage issues. So that right now is what we were talking about, which could potentially cause injury. And in the plan, I can't remember, I kind of quoted the section, outdoor amenities. You guys were looking at, the city was looking at upgrading existing ball diamonds and sport fields to improve it. So that's why we're pinpointing. And as you can tell, there obviously physically is the drainage issue there. What are the benefits to the region? Really, this is what it comes down to. Why would you really want this cricket pitch here? It's going to address point 1.2, the benefits of it, right? Of the, I know it's an abbreviation, but without a proper cricket pitch, Cricket BC and Cricket Canada say that we cannot host tournaments here. So without that, we can't do that. Cricket tournaments bring in a lot of community dollars. It is a very big sport. As you can tell, it's the second largest sport in the world. This is also, we talked about staffing issues. This can also help retain potential skilled workers. Because if we are bringing skilled workers from around the world, this is a sport that they want to play. We've noticed within the Northwest, being that our cricket pitch is almost complete in the Thornhill area, that it's actually had a couple of players purchase homes within their region. So they are staying. The other piece is it provides a new sport for the community, which is a very big deal because growing up here in Rupert, I know there's sometimes limited amount of things for us to do. This is a sport that you can get into, and we have the equipment already. So there's not where someone can come in without having that investment. We have already gone out to the school district in Terrace and Kitimat. We've done intro to cricket sessions. Kids are super excited about this. And also, we currently have a lot of high-level athletes here that can share their expertise. A lot of people don't realize we have an IPL cricketer that lives right here in Prince Rupert. The other piece is we are also going to, I'm addressing the page 63 benefits of the Parks and Recreation. There's a lot of different funding factors that you guys, I don't know if have explored or not, but I do know there is the NDIT one, and I believe it's up to $100,000 in order to create new sports. And this is considered a new sport to Prince Rupert, because now it's officially an organized sport where we're recognized by a provincial body. There's also where we have reached out to the Port Authority already, and they have indicated that they are willing to support us with the construction of the pitch. We just do not have property, which is what we are looking to the city to explore. Really, it would be Roosevelt, because every other location seems to always be booked. As you can tell right here, this is where we have gone out and we have actually introduced this into the schools. We've recently done one at a daycare as well. So a lot of children that are in softball, fastball, it translates a lot easier here. Their season is very short. This can be something that can be extended. So our ask is, I realize we can't create a pitch maybe this year because of the fact of the drainage issue. But our ask is if at least we can maybe get some topsoil to level it. I don't know exactly what the cost would be of something like that. But that is what we're hoping, because there are a lot of divots which can cause a lot of injury. And our athletes are only insured at the Civic Center. So not Roosevelt Field as of yet, because it's not a properly constructed cricket pitch there.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you.
Comments or questions from council? Councilor Rundell.
Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I know cricket is a emerging, a growing sport in Canada. Like our cricket team first time playing in the World Cup actually, Canadian cricket team. So it's very like famous. So thank you for your presentation and wish you all the best.
Councilor
Thank you.
Ady.
I want to thank you for a childhood memory that I haven't come across for a long time. A young lad in England, where I was born. I remember the Christmas present was the cricket bat, and I remember the smell of the linseed oil that I used to treat the wood. Unfortunately, I also remember my dad coming home after umpiring and taking a ball in the mouth. It is not a baseball, that's for sure. I won't dwell on the dental work that followed. My question is there a problem with artificial turf as a surface?
I'm gonna let the expert deal with that one.
Hi there, my name is Piyush. So the thing is, like, we can get the artificial pitch as well over here, and the main concern is if for this year we can just get gravels on the ground in the center of the Roosevelt. It will be much easier to get just practice because the tournaments are coming pretty soon. So that will be a best chance to get just practice and show us what Rupert and Northwest can do.
Councilor Forster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious if a cricket pitch is multi-use. If we were to put the topsoil in on the Roosevelt, does that mean that field can no longer be used for kids softball, baseball, soccer, things like that? Or is it able to be used as multifunction?
That's an awesome question. I was just down in Surrey and I just flew in today. So I was taking in a few of the games there. Theirs is multi-purpose. So there is a way to definitely do that. We have just ordered a jute mat. But once again, we kind of need it leveled off because of the fact that we need to have our athletes play with a leather ball, which is very different than the tennis ball that they're playing with right now. Even though this hasn't been announced yet, but we have an opportunity to bring in the Cricket Canada head selection coach that was at the T20 series in the States. And is it Barbados? Yeah, Barbados. So we are in the final stages of bringing this gentleman up because that's the selection. So a lot of our athletes have the potential to take it to an international, to a national level. So we're working really hard on that because there is a lot of talent. It is a new sport where a lot of our youth can also excel. We have the equipment already. We have the equipment for the youth. We have the protective equipment for the adults. We just need to be able to play it and share the love of the sport. So we have everything.
Councilor Forster.
Thank you. My follow-up question, you mentioned that in order to get insurance, there needed to be a proper pitch field. Yes. So is that simply adding the dirt, or is there more work after that? Are we looking at a 1-year plan, a 3-year plan? What's the time frame we're looking at?
I do know that I had to work with Cricket BC directly for that. Their definition is very different. Ours that we have, that Northwest Cricket BC has in the regional district area, is a concrete pitch. And then there's the artificial turf on top. So they have suggested that is the best route, but that's not the only route. So we can do the gravel, and then they usually crush it down. So there are other avenues to do so.
I would think this is something that would have to be investigated with the city. Drainage is a massive issue.
It is totally the drainage issue first.
Councillor Cunningham.
Does the pitch have to be totally level in the whole diameter of the circle?
I'll let you address that, sir.
So the pitch, basically we need the center of it, because it's like we have center and the ground's leveling is around 60 meters, the boundaries line, but the 30 meters is basically we need it because as we used to play over there, and we put a 30-yard circle near the pitch is too damp over there because of the rain and everything. That's the basic need we need, like if we can get the 30th meter level.
Yeah.
Because most of our fields have a crowd for a reason, drainage. And so if you've got to have a fairly level playing field, it's going to be an attraction for a drainage problem. And what's the diameter of a cricket?
It's 22 yards cricket pitch.
22 yards, 60, 70 feet.
Yeah. And just on that end of things, Councillor Cunningham, ours in Terrace, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say Terrace, Regional District, is kind of pitched like this slightly, just because of those issues as well. So yeah, it's not completely underneath is flat, but the way that they have constructed it is at a slight angle.
Okay, it's definitely something that we could be looking at in our 1 or 2 or 3 year plan.
Councillor Nish.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, when we had kids playing soccer up there and using that field, you know, it was very deep mud and lots of kids running around. So obviously there's major drainage issues up there, which would cost probably hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, you know, I think even putting topsoil on top of that, it probably is not going to solve any problems. So I think it's definitely something that, you know, would have to, I mean, it's a major budget implication in order to move forward on anything up there. So, you know, I think probably working, you know, with staff to...
You know, council, none of us are experts in that field. And so it would be a matter of staff taking some time to work it through and have a look at the challenges and the possibilities. Councillor Cunningham.
Have you talked to Port Ed about they've got a very large field out there that might...
We have not explored that as of yet. We thought we should come to the city of Prince Rupert first. And I know I say Roosevelt, but if there are any other fields that we might be able, that are available, that is fine as well. I think a lot of the cases is why we haven't gone to Port Ed yet is a lot of the players are within the city center, and transportation may or may not be an issue.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your coming. All of you. Yeah. All right. Just before we go on, I appreciate all the presentations, but I wanted to particularly thank Manager Stewart for that whole report. It's really well done, and I've heard a number of people in the community discussing it in a really positive light. So thank you very much for that. And seeing the picture of Woodworth Dam just reminded me how much everything we do is built on the efforts of the council that goes before us. We just, you know, each of us carries the ball a little further down the field, right? And yeah, it just, it's amazing. All right, with that, we move on to reports. We have a report from the Director of Corporate and Legislative Services with regards to some governance policies. There are 6 of them altogether. 1, administrative fairness. 2nd is vending sales from public property. 3rd is council policy for consideration of cannabis retail applications. 4th is insurance settlements of small claims. The 5th is insurance liability coverage third party. And the 6th is purchasing policy. Again, because we don't make binding decisions, but I think it's worth a vote of council to pass this forward to be actioned. I would entertain a motion. Councillor Forster and Councillor Randhawa. Is there any comment on any of these? Any changes, any suggestions? I'm seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Thank you very much. I'm going to skip over questions and inquiries from members of council because we can do that in a regular council meeting and call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Randhawa and Ady, all in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We will adjourn the committee of the whole.